What I'm about to tell you may blow your mind, but it is vital for you to understand, and it is completely true. I have my teachers. This is not the mind-blowing part. I have my teachers, and they have taught me some interesting things. Something that one of them taught me was about, well, he taught me a lot about hypnosis. And one of the things that he taught me was about mass hypnosis. You may have seen on the news reports about mob riots in different parts of the world over something as innocuous as a sport event. You may know that people who get swept up in these riots often end up doing things that they swear up and down that they would never do, that they never would have even thought of doing. And the question comes up, what causes people who otherwise would never have done such things to do such things? In order to answer this question, we turn to renowned professor of psychology and one of America's leading hypnosis experts, George Estabrooks from Colgate University. Not only is he an expert on hypnosis, but he also did some work on the CIA's MK program, which was a program investigating, among other things, ways to control people's minds. He had developed his own theories about hypnosis and mind control, that anybody's mind could be controlled even to do things that they did not want to do, even to harm others or themselves, whether it was in them or not. His techniques involved using hypnosis to create an alternate personality, or two, one of which would be trained to carry out a variety of different tasks, and one of which would be the deepest personality, the one in contact with the other personalities, which did not know of each other. He believed that he could take a loyal American citizen and turn him into a treasonist. And according to some of the leaked documents from MK he was able to take a Marine and create a personality in him that was a radical communist, and had gotten him dishonorably discharged from the military. In any case, in 1943, this man published a book entitled Hypnotism. In this book, he described Hitler as the world's best hypnotist, and even wrote a whole chapter on him called This Man, Hitler. Something that a lot of people don't know is that Hitler served in his country's military during World War I, during which time he contracted a condition called hysterical blindness. Now, this isn't blindness from injury of the brain or injury of the eyes or optic nerve. This is a kind of blindness that comes about through a psychological problem. As such, he was sent to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist used hypnosis to cure Hitler of his hysterical blindness. But in using hypnosis, he included certain key phrases and concepts that completely and radically changed Hitler's personality and his future goals. He included phrases about how Hitler was special, destined for greatness, and would unite the world, in order to motivate him to overcome his hysterical blindness. Hitler's eyesight was restored, and he gained a newfound interest in hypnosis, studying some of the best hypnotists of his time. In Estabrooks' book, he illuminated the secrets of Hitler's hypnotic approach, how he got ordinary citizens from all over his country to participate, to justify what he did, and to do things that they normally would never have done. In fact, that's how a lot of people became Nazis. And in fact, it was made a lot easier in a group setting, such as his massive rallies. This is partially because, about 20% of the population, that's 1/5 of the people in any given population, are highly hypnotizable. One-fifth are almost completely unhypnotizable, but they can still be reached through a variety of methods of indirect hypnosis. That leaves 3/5 of any given population that can be hypnotized to various degrees. And in group settings, hypnosis tends to work on the expectation ritual scale. This is a scale of inverse proportion. That is to say that the amount of expectation of what's about to happen is inversely proportional to the amount of ritual needed to make it happen, or needed to build up the expectation that it will happen. The more people you see getting sucked into a speech, effectively being hypnotized during a speech, the more likely you are to expect it to happen to you, which means the more likely your subconscious mind is to allow or even cause it to happen to you. The less people go into a hypnotic trance, the more necessary ritual is to convince you to go into a trance, to go into hypnosis. In Estabrooks' book on hypnotism, he uncovered the secrets of Hitler's hypnotic approach. There are 5 components, each of which builds on the others, each of which is familiar to those who know anything about hypnosis. These 5 components are as follows: emotional contagion, restricting the field of consciousness, social sanction, a feeling of omnipotence, and the removal of inhibitions. Now, emotional contagion is necessary because your emotional state is one of the easiest and most powerful ways to get you into a trance. Any sufficiently deep emotional state is a trance state, because a trance is just a state of focused attention through which you filter your experiences, your thoughts, your feelings. In order to make this happen, people might use vague language that makes you search inside yourself for meaning, which then makes it apply to you. They might also use emotionally charged words or loaded language, buzzwords and catchphrases that have meanings that are emotionally charged to get you into a certain emotional state. A lot of times, people find themselves starting off on the periphery of a group, barely being involved at all, but once their emotions become inflamed, once they get into a highly emotional state, they're drawn even further into the involvement of that group. The next step is to restrict the field of consciousness, or, to put it another way, focus attention. You guide attention through the emotional state, through the emotional overload, and you focus attention by restricting the field of consciousness. You keep people focused on the emotional state and on the message within the emotional state. This blocks out all distractions from the outside world and makes it harder for you to pull back and really consciously, critically think about things. This is especially possible and effective through the earlier implementation of emotional overload. The next part is social sanction. Once you are emotionally overloaded, once your field of consciousness is restricted, you're given a message of social sanction, something that the leaders of the group want from you is acceptable. They come up with all kinds of excuses and reasons and logic behind it. But only when you're emotionally overloaded and your field of consciousness, your focus of attention is restricted, can they feed you this social sanction. This develops through a group sanction, and in such group settings, people can develop a feeling of omnipotence. A person by themselves is very much aware of many of their limitations, which is why they feel like they can't do certain things, even if those limitations are imposed on them by themselves, even if those limitations are not so much in how you can actually do something, but the morals and values and ethics of it. Once a person becomes part of a group, the more people are working together toward a unified goal, the easier it is for them to accomplish. And this can give you a feeling that you, as a part of the group, can do anything. A feeling of omnipotence. Nothing is held back from you. Nothing is standing in your way. And once you get that feeling, this leads to the removal of inhibitions. In fact, in his book Hypnosis, Estabrooks tells a story to emphasize the point about what can be done using emotion and restricting the field of consciousness. This is from the book. The writer once had one of these professional stage hypnotists as his guest. Several students who were majors in psychology came around to make his acquaintance. They asked him to demonstrate, and he demonstrated one or two simple tests, which located for him a couple of good subjects. Then the real demonstration began. The men knew that, in theory, he could not hypnotize them without their consent, and were inclined to be a little contemptuous of this illiterate stage hypnotist. Illiterate in that he was a showman and knew nothing whatsoever of academic psychology. This attitude nettled the visitor, and he decided a lesson was in order. Approaching one of those he had decided were good subjects, he made the blunt announcement, "I'm going to hypnotize you." "Thanks, I don't want to be hypnotized." "That doesn't mean a thing," replied the professional. He stepped up quickly in front of his victim, seized him by both arms, looked straight into his eyes, and said, "Now listen, my child. I'm going to give you a lesson in manners. You can't take your eyes off mine, so don't waste time in trying. And you can't sit down in that chair, so stand where you are. You're going sound asleep. I will count to 5. By the time I get to 5, you will be on your feet. You will be out on your feet." And he was. The subject was obviously angry, made abortive efforts to strike the hypnotist, but went into a deep trance, a very neat display of the highly emotional nature of the professional attack. Estabrooks said of Hitler's use of emotional contagion and fear, "It would be a brave man indeed in Germany who dared raise his voice against the leader." He continues talking about how people who spoke up against Mussolini vanished, which made the prospect of doing so scary, but the Nazis improved on this technique by instilling genuine fear with concentration camps. Estabrooks says that these are much more effective. Death is a sudden thing and tends to be forgotten, but the living death of a political prisoner is a constant reminder to all that discretion is preferable to courage. Let's talk a little bit about how Hitler used these techniques. We've already discussed the emotional contagion. When choosing the emotions to use, Hitler chose to use fear to silence the opposition, but also because it is a useful foundation to build hatred on. Add to the hatred patriotism and myths of Nordic superiority, and you have something really powerful, something giving, a story, meaning, something to believe in and a group to feel a part of. With the manipulation of public news shows showing German superiority and us versus them stories, this fed into and supported the created reality of the masses. There would be people against it, but the plan would be for fear to keep them in check. Hitler controlled the press, and the radio created a potent weapon because radios were in people's homes and people were being controlled. So there was emotional contagion of fear and hatred and anger. This was restricting the field of consciousness on the reality created by the Nazis. Hitler built up the illusion of the social sanction by controlling radio and the press, promoting that the Nordics are the only superior race. They are being hemmed in and persecuted by all other groups, but it is their God-given duty to rise superior to these circumstances and rule the world. which supplied the people with a feeling of omnipotence to take group action, each individual acting with full approval of their group, feeling that only the group's approval is worthy of consideration, which meant that any action taken because of the group, suggesting or expecting it, was justified, releasing them from their inhibitions to carry out behavior they would never ordinarily do. Estabrooks also went on to write, "In laboratories, the hypnotist would try to keep the environment quiet, avoiding noises and distraction to try to increase success. Yet the stage hypnotist will find that the brighter the lights, the bigger the crowd, the better the success." Clinical and research hypnotists use relaxation inductions in a quiet environment, suggesting relaxation, while stage hypnotists tend to use shock, surprise, and confusion. They use all of these different trappings of their trade: loud environments, bright lights, big elaborate sets. They create a mood or image, posters and marketing material, and claims, all of this building expectation, exciting and causing anxiety in people. As well as knowing about hypnosis, Hitler also studied Gustav Le Bon's book, The Crowd, about crowd psychology. Estabrooks said about Hitler's meetings, "Hitler stages the meetings at night in the open. He himself is in the glare of lights, is above his audience, forcing the listeners to look up and at a bright object. Braid in the 1840s discovered that this simple concentration on an object was quite enough to get hypnotism." Everything about the environment, the bright lights, the nighttime setting, the higher position, all of these things, as well as how he chose to use his voice and gestures and how his image was portrayed to the public and others, all of them work together to provide these 5 qualities, both in his message and in the crowd. They caused emotional contagion. They restricted the field of consciousness. They built a social sanction of what was expected and accepted. They caused a feeling of omnipotence in the individuals who were part of the crowd. And they removed inhibitions that kept them from supporting or doing such things. When you yourselves are feeling that emotional component, when you're starting to focus more on the speech, when you start to think about what the crowd wants, what is expected of you, when you start to feel like you can do no wrong, when you start to feel like nothing is out of reach for you, when you start to rethink your inhibitions, that's when you must take a step back. Remove yourself mentally from the conditions being imposed on you and really question what you're being fed, what's being expected of you, what you could and could not do, say, think, or feel. Remember, elitism is the disease. You are the cure.